Welcome to our study of poetry during National Poetry Month. Now I introduce you to probably the greatest poet in American history, a man named Langston Hughes. He grew up listening to his grandmother, who would sit on the porch and tell him stories of his ancestors, including his grandfather, Lewis Sheridan, who had fought with John Brown to try to break the back of slavery years ago. She told him that he was a hero. He had died admirably. She taught him many lessons. After she died, he went to live with his mom, who was then divorced from his dad, in Cleveland. In Cleveland, he was voted the class poet. And he noticed that when he would write a poem and recite it to his classmates, they really loved it. So Langston wrote one of his first poems when he was still in grade school. And the poem was titled, "When Sue Wears Red." Now it evokes some emotion from both the male species and the female species. It is a very outstanding poem. It was one of his first poems. Let me share with you "When Sue Wears Red," written by a young Langston Hughes when he was about in the 8th grade. When Sue wears red. When Susanna Jones wears red, her face is like an ancient cameo turned brown by the ages. Come with a blast of trumpets, Jesus! When Susanna Jones wears red, a queen from some time-dead Egyptian night walks once again. Blow trumpets, Jesus! And the beauty of Susanna Jones in red burns in my heart, a love fire sharp like pain. Sweet silver trumpets, Jesus! That was when Susanna Jones wears red. Now, some of his poems were published in The Crisis, which was the official magazine of the National Association of Colored People, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the founders of that organization and the editor of that magazine, he highlighted the poems of Langston Hughes. And one of his early poems, Hughes dedicated to W.E.B. Du Bois, and that poem is entitled "The Negro Speaks of Rivers." It says, I've known rivers, ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. And I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. This was a much celebrated poem, and you saw it in many different places and preserved, and people were quoting it and reading from it. It was truly one of the great poems in American history. The Negro Speaks of Rivers, dedicated to W.E.B. Du Bois. Now, he had his poems put together and published in a book. This is the single most important, I think, the best single book by one author with poems where every poem is fantastic. He had another called I Too, and it went like this. I too sing America. I'm the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and I eat well and I grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. And besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and feel ashamed. I too am American. All of these poems were in this one book called The Weary Blues by Langston Hughes. I have to share one more, if I may. It is also one of the great poems in American history. Now, he dedicated this book to his mother, and this poem was called Mother to Son. It is many people's favorite poem of them all. It says, well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I've been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps cause you finds this kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I still going, honey. I still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. So this was Langston Hughes in this single book called The Weary Blues. By the way, that was a fantastic poem itself by about a piano player that was playing just beautiful music. The Weary Blues by Langston Hughes. That was a fantastic, fantastic poem. Langston Hughes was also commemorated with some U.S. postage stamps again, which is a wonderful way to learn history, to learn biographies, and to learn more about legacies that have been left for all of Americans to celebrate and to share.